Our first guest right now is Hollie McKay. She's reports with Fox News. She's reported from numerous war zones: Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, you name it. And she's there. Actually, she's, as I was reading, Hollie, and you can correct me on this, I read that you're kind of stuck there at this point. But we appreciate you giving us some of your time today. We hope that you're staying safe. But I can only imagine what it's like on the ground there right now. Give us some insight.
Absolutely. Well, I really would say, Donna, that I've experienced two different worlds in literally overnight. So, Kabul is a place that I love and spent a lot of time there. And I had some interviews in the north. And as we know, the north, there was a lot of heavy fighting happening last week. So I came up, and when I arrived in Mazar Sharif, it was just this beautiful, bustling place. The markets were open, people were out having fun in the streets till quite late. It was hard to imagine that not so far away that there was quite heavy fighting. And then the next day, I felt something really shift, and people were suddenly going to the bank and getting money. But there was this sort of strange sense that just kept happening. And eventually by Saturday, there was nobody around. And we had this sort of spidey sense and went back to our guest house. And then literally less than an hour later, the whole city just fell, and a bunch of guys came in on a motorcycle who were Taliban, shooting their guns in the air to celebrate victory without any resistance. And just like that, in that short period of time, Islamic law was introduced, and suddenly I was no longer able to leave my house or to go on the street unless I was completely covered in a burqa, as just one example of how things changed very quickly.
Oh my goodness! And I saw one of your tweets on this. You had said that you had liked, looking at the art on the street and selecting fabrics, and then and from what I understand too, women journalists particularly are not welcome there, and might, I would imagine, be in a degree of danger if the Taliban found out that some of these individuals, some of the females here, were actually journalists. Is what I'm hearing. Is that reporting accurate?
Well, I think, yes. I think as a foreigner, I don't really think the Taliban is targeting foreigners. They don't want foreigners here, but they don't. They're not at the moment during this kind of transition amnesty period. They aren't targeting foreigners, but for local journalists, yeah, they're very much a target, and especially women pretty much can't work full stop, let alone be sort of vocal or critical in any kind of way. So I think there's even fines for a woman speaking to a man on a phone. I think she can be subject to 40 lashings or something crazy like that. So that would make doing a job very impossible. And it's just so hard to imagine, especially for women that have lived 20 years and been able to go to school and get a great education and become journalists or doctors or lawyers or whatever, and then suddenly be told that that was just a waste and now they're relegated to their home. I just feel for the women. I can't imagine what that must be like.
We're talking with Hollie McKay, who is in Afghanistan. She's been reporting on this, as she has from previous war zones in the past. And Hollie, there's been so much confusion just from everyone else who's watching, from the United States, as to what's happening in Afghanistan, because we were assured by our military leaders that no, Kabul's not going to fall, Taliban is not going to take over Afghanistan. But obviously, from a lot of the reporters that are there on the ground, there's been a different sentiment building for quite some time. And I saw just the video this morning of Afghans that were falling from one of the Air Force, the huge jets that was taking off from the airport in Kabul. And it was just heartbreaking to see, because there were people who would rather hang on the side of the jet than to actually stay there in Kabul and face whatever was happening with the Taliban. This could not have been a surprise to anyone who has been in Afghanistan, which makes me wonder how it could have been a surprise to any military leader anywhere. What is your insight on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I honestly just sort of can't believe what a disaster this is. And even I just couldn't have imagined it. Every person that I spoke to, both on the United States side and the Afghanistan side, assuring me that Kabul was never going to fall, even, and parts of the north were never going to fall, and it was all going to be okay. And this information bleed was coming from all sides, and just completely incorrect. And I mean, even on Saturday, I was talking to an official about Mazar as it, before it was falling. And they said, you'll be fine. I said, I've got a flight out of here in a few days. You'll be fine until then. They said it would last, 7 days. And I'm talking like 7 minutes later, it was gone. So the information that we're all getting was wrong. But I think really what happened was the level of corruption, which I've argued for a really long time, the systemic corruption in the government, which the United States really ignored. So they sort of looked at the terrorism aspect of it and the Taliban aspect of it as being the root cause, when honestly, in many ways, I think it was a symptom of a very inept and corrupt government that just kept happening. And what we saw toward the end and why it fell so fast was that the military leaders and local commanders and governors were basically selling out and doing secret deals with the Taliban, getting a lot of money and then escaping and basically leaving these poor young soldiers to the slaughter who didn't know that secret deals had already been struck for the Taliban to take control. And so we saw that happen more and more. People were making financial benefits from it and then running. So even when President Ghani escaped the country before the Taliban came to the palace yesterday, that sort of cowardice has been happening pretty much for the last couple of months. And I think that's a really key factor as to why things escalated.
That's a major point, too, that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to right now. Talking with Hollie McKay, who's been reporting from war zones for a number of years, and she is currently reporting from Afghanistan, and we appreciate her joining us. Hollie, I read a report earlier that as it relates to the Chinese and Russian embassies, that the Taliban is they're guarding both of those embassies. Have you heard anything on this?
Yes, so that's accurate. But China and Russia have had relations with the Taliban for a long time. And Russia's actually been very open about its relationship with the Taliban. I remember when I was here in Afghanistan in 2017 and, was sort of exploring that relationship then. And Russia was very open, basically, in saying that they were supporting the Taliban because at that point the Taliban was fighting the ISIS affiliate in Afghanistan, and to Moscow, the ISIS affiliate was a threat to them, whereas the Taliban wasn't. So they viewed backing the Taliban as a better bulwark against ISIS than backing the government.
Interesting.
And China as well is sort of China has a lot of, it's obviously a border to Afghanistan, but it has a lot of vested interests in its roads and building and infrastructure. And so China stands to make a really huge amount of money in Afghanistan, especially now that the Taliban is in power. Russia is in prime position to, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was looking at some of the headlines, just some of the past headlines from when Taliban leaders had been meeting with Chinese officials in the lead up to this. One of the questions that in the timing of this actually that I'm mulling over is it seems so questionable to me that the decision to close Bagram Air Force Base before the United States had evacuated, the personnel and any allies, any of our intel, anybody that we were relying on for intelligence, or any of our interpreters. That I cannot figure out for the life of me why we closed Bagram Air Force Base so soon before, or so far before what happened just with the call to withdraw, and then of course we see all of this stuff happening. Do you have any at all insight into this? Because everybody's scratching their heads and we're just trying to figure out. That we cut our nose off to spite our face. I can't figure out why we did that.
I think it was pure and utter incompetency, definitely on one part. And then also, I'm not completely previous to the talks in Doha. I'm not sure just how much the US people there were willing to bend to the Taliban, because it is extremely bizarre. And either that or it's absolute pure incompetence, because Bagram would have really helped save a lot of people from the madness that we're seeing right now. And I don't know if President Biden thought he was going to get political points in sort of sticking it to pull out of Afghanistan, but it just seems, looking at it now, and I don't understand how he's still doubling down on that decision, seeing this absolute disaster unfold. And what really makes me upset is that it feels like this is kind of it. It feels like this group has come in and declared an Islamic emirate, which means there will never be another election. They will hold that power. And I can't imagine the US or anyone else is going to have any interest in changing that anytime soon. And I just, reaching September 11, 2021, and they will control more of the country than they controlled in September 11, 2001. And that should bother every single American.
It does.
And
It's
it's
unbelievable.
either a massive,
It's unbelievable here as we get going towards 20 years since 9/11. Last question for you. We're talking with Hollie McKay, who's reporting from Afghanistan, and we appreciate her time. As you said, you get the sense that this is kind of it. They're establishing this. Never will they have another election. They're calling essentially Afghanistan what they were calling it with the Taliban rule, even before this engagement by the United States took place. What do you see? How do you see things shifting further in the weeks to come? And, I guess the second part of this is when you do leave Afghanistan, I would imagine you would have to go through Taliban checkpoints, et cetera. I mean, are they going to allow people to freely leave?
My understanding right now is that Taliban, they are setting up the checkpoints. My understanding is they are letting foreigners out, but if you're a local Afghan, you're in a bad place. They're not letting Afghans go, but my understanding is, foreigners do have an amnesty period. So it's really heartbreaking. And I can't tell you the number of calls and just text messages of absolute distress that I've received in the last 24 hours of just people begging me whatever they can do. How can I help them? They're scared for their life. And it just breaks my heart because these are people that really, some of them fought for their country and really believed in their country, even though their country ended up selling them out. And then others just, supported the Americans and love America and have this beautiful view of America. And now they've been left to this draconian law. And I don't understand how this happened. I don't understand. And seeing a lot of the fighters out there, a lot of them are children on motorbikes that are illiterate, and now they're running a country. And I just don't know how this happened. I really am trying to understand it myself.
And you're there on the ground. That's what's so stunning about all of this is just how quickly this all happened. There are going to be a lot of people that have a lot of answers to give, definitely. Hollie McKay, we appreciate your time with us. Please be safe, and we're grateful for your reporting there on the ground. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care.